Welcome back to Diana's Diaries, friends. I'm so grateful you're here as we keep unraveling this story of mine. Last time, we stepped into the heat of it, where feelings turned into actions I couldn't take back. Today, we're facing what came after, when the world I'd built started cracking under the weight of it all. Life's got a way of catching up, doesn't it? You can run from the truth for a while, but sooner or later it finds you. So let's sit down together and see how it all came crashing down. After that night in the guest room, everything shifted. Quiet, slow, like the world holding its breath before a storm. Henry and I didn't talk much about what we'd done, but it hung between us, thick and real. We'd crossed a line, Lord knows we had, and there was no undoing it. Mornings came like always. Robert up early, sipping coffee, the kids tumbling downstairs, me at the stove flipping pancakes. I'd catch Henry's eye across the table and we'd share a look, quick, secret, loaded with everything we couldn't say. It was dangerous, reckless even, but it felt like ours and that kept me holding on. Days turned into weeks, and Henry didn't leave. He'd mumble something about work in Kentucky being slow, and Robert just shrugged, happy to have his dad around. "Stay as long as you like," he'd say, clapping Henry on the back. I'd nod, smile, play the part, but inside, I was walking a tightrope. Every touch from Henry, a brush of his hand when we passed in the hall, a squeeze under the table, lit me up and tore me apart all at once. Guilt gnawed at me, sharp and cold, but the pull was stronger. I'd lie awake beside Robert, his steady breathing a reminder of what I was risking, and still, I couldn't let Henry go. We got bolder, too bold. A kiss in the pantry when Robert was out front, a whispered word when the kids weren't looking. It was like playing with fire, knowing full well it'd burn us someday. And it did. Henry's birthday rolled around, a quiet little thing we'd planned. Just the three of us, a cake, maybe some cards. I got it in my head to do something special for him, something reckless. I'd slipped into town earlier that week, bought a silky scarf, deep red, soft as a whisper, and tucked it away with a note. "Meet me after supper." It was foolish, but I wanted him to know how deep this ran, how much I couldn't shake him. That night, we sat around the table, Robert laughing, cutting the cake, Henry smiling that soft smile of his. I'd tied the scarf around my neck, casual-like, but Henry's eyes flickered when he saw it, a spark only I could read. Everything felt normal on the surface. Robert telling stories about the store, me passing plates, but underneath it was electric. I could feel Henry across from me, every glance a secret thread tying us tighter. The kids had gone to bed early, worn out from school, and it was just us three, the fire crackling low. Then it all fell apart. Robert remembered some papers he'd stashed in Henry's bag. "Order forms for the store," he said. "Be right back," he muttered, heading to the hall. I didn't think much of it, just kept clearing the table, my mind on Henry and that note I'd slipped him. But when Robert came back, he was too quiet, too still. His face was hard, like he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. "I've got to step out," he said, voice flat, grabbing his keys. "Work thing, won't be long." He kissed my cheek, quick, cold, and was gone before I could ask. My stomach dropped, but I told myself it was nothing, just my nerves playing tricks. Henry and I were alone now, the house silent except for the wind rattling the windows. I looked at him, saw the same unease in his eyes, but neither of us spoke it. "Guess it's just us," I said, trying to keep it light. He nodded, slow, and stood up. I untied the scarf, letting it drape over my shoulders, and his gaze followed it, dark and heavy. We didn't need words, we knew. I followed him down the hall, my heart pounding, till we reached the guest room again. The door shut, and it was like the world outside vanished. His hands were on me, pulling me close, and I gave in, kissing him hard, letting that fire take over. The scarf slipped to the floor, forgotten, as we sank into each other, desperate and sure. We didn't hear the truck pull back up, didn't hear the front door creak. We were lost in it, lips, hands, the heat of it all, when the guest room door flew open. Robert stood there, his shadow filling the frame, his face a storm of rage and hurt. I froze, breath caught, as Henry stumbled back, shirt half undone. "What the hell is this?" Robert roared, voice low and deadly. I yanked the sheet up, words tangling in my throat, but there was no explaining this away. He'd seen it all, me, Henry, the truth laid bare. "You—" Robert lunged at Henry, fists flying before I could move. "You're my father!" he shouted, each word cracking with pain. Henry threw up his arms, blocking the blows, but he didn't fight back. Not really. "Robert, stop!" I cried, scrambling off the bed, but he turned on me, eyes blazing. "And you!" he snarled. "My wife?" The betrayal in his voice cut deeper than any fist could. I reached for him, pleading, but he shoved past, slamming Henry against the wall. "How could you?" he yelled, tears mixing with the fury. It was chaos, shouting, shoving, the room spinning around us. Henry took the hits, his face tight, but I could see he wouldn't hurt his son, not more than he already had. Finally, Robert stepped back, chest heaving, and pointed at the door. "Get out," he said, voice cold as ice. "Both of you. I don't ever want to see you again." I opened my mouth to beg, to explain, but his glare stopped me dead. "Now," he snapped, and there was no arguing with that. We didn't say a word as we grabbed what we could, my coat, Henry's bag, a handful of clothes stuffed in a hurry. The house felt like a stranger's as we stumbled out into the night, the hills looming dark and silent. Robert's truck was still in the drive, lights off, and I could feel his eyes on us through the window, boring holes into my back. Henry started his old pickup, the engine rumbling low, and I climbed in, numb. We drove off, the headlights cutting through the dark, leaving behind everything I'd known, my home, my family, my life. The silence between us was heavy, choking. Henry gripped the wheel, knuckles white, his jaw set hard. I stared out the window, the trees blurring past, and felt the weight of it all settle in. What had we done? What had I let happen? The man beside me wasn't just Henry anymore. He was the match that had lit the fuse, and now everything was burning. I wanted to say something, to bridge the gap, but the words wouldn't come. We'd wanted each other, sure, but this was the cost, and it was more than I'd ever bargained for. We pulled into a motel an hour later, some run-down place off the highway, flickering neon, chipped paint, the kind of spot you pass without a second thought. Henry got us a room, his voice flat as he handed over cash, and we shuffled inside. The bed creaked under us as we sat, miles apart even in that tiny space. I looked at him, searching for something, regret maybe, or hope, but his face was blank, closed off. "What now?" I whispered, barely audible. He didn't answer, just stared at the wall, and I knew then that whatever we'd had, it was cracking under the weight of what we'd lost. That's how it fell apart, folks. A birthday cake and a scarf turned into a night I'll never forget. We'd built something in secret, but secrets don't stay buried, do they? Next time on Diana's Diaries, we'll see what happened when the dust settled, or didn't? What would you have done? Let me know below, I'm listening.